So we're on Daf Mem. And we have here a sugya that presents the following issue. Just let me backtrack a little to Abba Shol. And Abba Shol was of the opinion that the Yevamot initially, before she got married to Ruvain, was heter, as far as Shimon is concerned. Like Shimon could have married her. Then, after Ruvain marries her, she becomes Isur. And then, after Ruvain dies, then we need a Yevamot Yavo Aleha L'mitzvah in order for her to go back to her original state of heter. If he's lacking in the Kavanah L'mitzvah, that means Shimon, when he marries Rachel, he does so for, we gave three possible reasons: L'shem Yofi, L'shem Ishus, L'shem Davar Acher, which we said was Mammon. In such a case, he does not fulfill the mitzvah, or at least not on the highest level, and it cannot bring her, meaning the Yevamot, back to her original state of heter. That was Abba Shol's opinion. Now we have a machlokes with regard to a brisa. The brisa can be interpreted and should be interpreted as reflecting the shita of Abba Shol. And that's going to be Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak is going to say that the brisa that we're studying, which is here on the bottom of Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis that we studied last week, that brisa reflects the shita of Abba Shol. Rav, on the other hand, tries to reconcile that brisa with Abba Shol. With the Chachamim of Abba Shol. And he says the following: when it says in the brisa Yevamot Yavo Aleha mitzvah, which sounded, and that's what Rabbi Yitzchak was saying, like Abba Shol, that unless you have a mitzvah, you cannot bring this Yevamot back into a state of heter once she was Eishes Av. You need the mitzvah critically. On the other hand, according to the Rabbanon, if we want to reconcile the Rabbanon with the brisa, we're going to say that when the brisa says Yevamot Yavo Aleha mitzvah, what it means is that if all things are equal, he should be miyabim. That's his primary mitzvah. So I'm just going to read Rava's words just as a review. He says that B'tchila, Haisa B'chal Heter, Ratzil Konsa, Lo Ratzil Konsa, Nesra, and then Chazra V'hutra. Yachol Shetachzor Le'Teira HaRishon, and then again it'd be Ratzil L'Konsa, Ratzil Shein L'Konsa, in other words, he has no chiyuv to be miyabima, and that's what this brisa quotes the pasuk Yevamot Yavo Aleha mitzvah, that he's obligated, again, if he possibly can, to be miyabima. So the Gemara now says the following: Bishlei Mele Rava. Let's count how many lines down are we? Bishlei Mele Rava, it should be about 4 lines down from the top of Daf Mem. Bishlei Mele Rava Diyomer Hamani Rabbanon Hi. According to Rava, the word mitzvah means that if he has a choice between Yibum and Chalitza, then if all things are equal, he should be Mekayim Yibum. He has a mitzvah and a chiyuv of Yibum. And it means mitzvah, whether he has in mind l'shem mitzvah, or he has in mind some other motivation, some other kavana, it doesn't matter, but he's got to be miyavim. If all things are equal, if he doesn't have a reason why not, he's chayav in the midst of yibum. Is now we can shed a light on the brisa of Shiari Mincha, right? In the brisa of Shiari Mincha, we also vacillated back and forth whether or not the Kohen is obligated to eat the shirayim of the Mincha if he does kmitza. And we came to the conclusion that matzos te'achel b'makom kadosh, there's a special pasuk, a source from which we derive the mitzvah that the Kohen is obligated to eat the shiari mincha. Again, Bishlem Rav and the Amar Hamani Rabbanani Hacha the Brisa with regard to Achila Shiari Mincha Hachikama Matzos Te'acha b'makom kadosh mitzvah, meaning the Kohen is Nitzuva Shebetchila Lifnei Shehuktisha Haisa Olav Bechlal Heter Ratza Ochla Ratza Ein Ochla. This is before he was Magdish the Mincha. Then once he was Magdish the Mincha Nesra, because he needs what's called Haktoras Hakometz. And then after the Kometz is brought on the Mizbeach, is Chazra V'Hutra. Now it comes Mutar B'Achila. Yochol Shetatzel Etera Rishon, which means it goes back to the state of pre-Hakdacha, and he has a choice. Does he want to eat it? Does he not want to eat it? And therefore, Ratzel Ochla, Ratzel Ochla. And this is exactly parallel, analogous to the case of Yibum. Originally, Rachel's status was heter as far as Shimon is concerned. He could have married her, he could have not married her. It's had choices in his. Then Reuven marries her and generates an Eser of Eishes Ach, an Erev of Eishes Ach. Now Reuven is out of the picture. And what do we go back to? Do we go back to Ratzel Akomsa, Lo Ratzel Akomsa? You know, it's a toss-up. He'll decide whether he wants to marry her or not. And if he decides, I don't want to marry her, then he'll give a chalitza. Talmud Lomar, we're going to derive from the pasuk Yevamot Yavo Aleha mitzvah liyavim. It's not just a toss-up like it was in the original heter before Rachel was married to Reuven, but now it's a push of the mitzvah of Yevamot Yavo Aleha, and the parallel is with regard to the Kohen eating from shiari mincha. And the final maskot is matzos te'acha b'makom kadosh. And that's going to prove to us that the Kohen is obligated in the mitzvah of achilas shiari mincha.
That can be any kind. That can be any kind. It's not beginning. Is that not?
I think it's the obligation of the Kohen Ovid who did the kmitza. If I'm not mistaken, kmitza. Didn't we say this, Rabbi, when we were studying Menachos, that kmitza and achila shirayim is like two parts of the same mitzvah? Again, I don't have the text with me, but that's what I seem to recall. Ratza Eina Ochel. Gemara says, wait a minute. The brisa doesn't make much sense. Well, what does the brisa mean when it says that there's a havamina that the Kohen could decide whether or not he wants to eat the shiari mincha? That was the havamina. And the Gemara and the brisa quotes a pasuk Tamalo Matzos Te'achel B'makom Kadosh in order to disprove that havamina that he can decide whether he wants to eat the mincha. For Ksiv, it says v'yachlu also masher kupar ben. B'lamich hakoyin oflim, b'baylim iskaprim. It's through the achilas kohanim that we achieve a full-fledged kapara. So how is it possible to say that if the kohen decides that he doesn't want to eat the shirayim, we don't compel him, we can't force him to eat it? If the achila of the Kohen is what generates the kaparas habaylim, that's the obligation of the Kohen. What is the obligation of the Kohen if not to bring kapara to the baylim? So he has to eat the shari mincha because otherwise the mincha goes without kapara. So again, now we're stuck. How did the Brisa raise the possibility that Ratza Kohen Ochla, Lo Ratza Ain't Ochla? How's that possible? The Kohen is in charge. His responsibility is to bring about the kapara, which is dependent upon the Achilas HaKohen. Elo, says the Gemara, you know what? Let's interpret the Brisa in the following way. This is your point, David. Good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't realize that the Gemara is going to... David was asking, who says that the Kohen himself has to eat it? So let's see exactly how this works. Ela ratza hu ochla, lo ratza Kohen acher ochla. I don't know if it's a carte blanche. Every single Kohen could eat the shari. Any Kohen could eat. Maybe the Anshe Mishpah. I don't know what it is. Unfortunately, I don't have any notes on this. Oh, I'm not even going to ask you if... What? I'm not going to ask you, Steve, but maybe Reuven or John have access to an art scroll? No. You have access to Steinsaltz. I know Reuven lifted up a finger there. I don't know if there's any significance to Reuven's finger. Probably there is.
Okay, the note 3, it says, although the mincha, like any sacrifice that is eaten by the Kohanim, is divided among the Kohanim who are on duty in the temple. Right. It is. So it is nonetheless a mitzvah for the particular Kohen who offered the mincha to partake of at least some of that mincha. And they call it Rashi.
Wait a minute. So let me clarify one thing, Reuven. What you're reading now, if I understand correctly, is the maskana of this Brisa after Talmud Lomar. Am I right?
So
Talmud Lomar matzos te'ochel b'makom kadosh mitzvah, meaning there's a special mitzvah incumbent on the Kohen who did the kmitza. But technically,
right, it's not,
any Kohen on a member of the Mishmar, Anshe Mishmar, could eat the mincha, the shari mincha. But what does he? Are there any comments there on the Havamina when it says Ratza hu ochla, Ratza Kohen acher ochla?
It says the Gemara takes the verse to mean that through the Kohanim's consumption of their portion of the sacrifice, the owners of the sacrifice complete their atonement.
Let me just see one thing here. So again, we're going to derive from the pasuk Matzos Te'ochel Makom Kadosh mitzvah that the Kohen is doing the avoda of this mincha. He did the kmitza. He is obligated to eat the shirayim. Okay.
Maybe it's Makom Kadosh has to be in the That's what it's,
For sure. So again, all this, let's just summarize. Everything we've been saying works out beautifully according to Rava, that the Brisa is reflecting the sheet of the Chachamim of Abba Shaul, And the issue is that we go back to the original state where it was Ratzah, Lo Ratzah. It was his choice. And the Brisa in both parallel cases, whether it's Yibum or whether it's Achila Shirayim Avakar Mincha, the Brisa is going to prove and establish that it's not just Ratzah this and Ratzah that, just flip a coin, it's a matter of your preference, but rather you are obligated. In the case of Yibum, you're obligated in Yibum, and don't think about Chalitza. In the case of Shiari Mincha, you are personally, as the Kohen Oved, obligated in eating the Shirayim, if all things are equal. Ela Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi di Omar. Abba Sholhi, right up. It was according to Rabbi Yitzchak. We identify the author of the Brisa as Abba Shol, which means that even though he has two possibilities, he can either have kavanah l'shem mitzvah or not have kavanah l'shem mitzvah, because we would have said it goes back to the hetera rishon, before Rachel was married to Reuven, when Shimon could have married Rachel. And we interpret the pasuk li'akev sheyesh rak efsharas achas shemiskayemes bo mitzvahs yibum kishehi l'shem mitzvah. So we're deriving from a pasuk that it's not enough to say, well, he has kavanah, he doesn't have kavanah. He absolutely must. It's a critical requirement. He has to have kavanah l'shem mitzvah. And now we're ready for the kasha on Rabbi Yitzchak. Hacha, with regard to achilas shiari mitzvah, my shrei gavne ika. So where's the parallel, according to Abba Shol, given Rabbi Yitzchak's interpretation, between the Yavam who may want to have mitzvah in mind, maybe he doesn't have mitzvah in mind, and the case of the Kohen? The case of the Kohen boils down to one question: will he eat the shirayim? Will he not eat the shirayim? The issue of kavanah has not been raised. We've never addressed the question of what kavanah does he have? Is he has the highest, holiest kavanah l'shem mitzvah or not? Oh, so the Gemara says, you know what? Why not offer this very simple answer to that question? Ratza l'teyavan ochla, ratza achila gasa ochla. We're going to give him two choices. We're going to compare the situation after Kmitza to that which predated the Hakadasha. Before the Hakadasha, he had two options. He could eat it for Achila Gasa, he can eat it for L'teyama. L'teyama means when he has an appetite, whereas Achila Gasa means when he's already satiated. So what now is the pasuk teaching me? It says matzos te'achel, correct? Matzos te'achel b'makom kadosh. And what does that mean? There's only one way that's acceptable to eat the shiari mincha, and that's l'teyama. Because otherwise, the other option is it's an achila gasa. We don't want an achila gasa. So the Gemara rejects this. The Chitem, and if you're going to tell me that the Ratzah, low Ratzah is, does he want to eat it this way or that way? Does he want to eat it on less than a full belly or on a full belly? Achila Gasa, Mishma Achila. The Torah doesn't recognize an Achila Gasa as an Achila. Now, before we go on, I'd like to interject a distinction between two categories of Achila Gasa. Are you familiar with this? There's an Achila Gasa, which means that he's already full. And then there's an Achila Gasa beyond that, which is called Katz B'Mizona, where literally he feels like he wants to regurgitate. You could be absolutely satiated from a meal, like on Leil Shabbos. We had a meal here last, Friday night here on this table that I'm pointing to. And frankly speaking, I was perfectly satiated after all the food that we had. And then one of our guests had baked a cake, and they brought out the cake. I don't know. All of a sudden, I ate the cake. So that might be an Achila Gasa. I don't know. But then there's a level beyond that, where you're so full that it's pasha coming up on you. That's already called Katz B'Mizona. He's repulsed by his eating.
I'm a little slow on the uptake on what this means vis-a-vis a yibum.
What we're saying is that we're looking for a Ratzah, low Ratzah, to parallel Yibum and Achilas Kohen B'Shiari Mincha.
Okay.
And Rava was very successful because Rava said that there was a Havamin in both cases of Yibum and in Achilas Shirayim, that we go back to the original state. And the original state was pure heter, which means in the case of Yibum before Reuven married Rachel, and in the case of Shiari Mincha, before they were Magdich the Mincha, the Soles, as a Mincha. And there's an exact parallel between the two cases. Shall we say that in the case of Yibum, the death of Reuven now brings Rachel back to her original status? Or in the case of Shirayim, after the Kmitza, the Mincha goes back to its original status? That's the exact parallel according to Rav.
Okay.
We're now trying to find a Ratzah, low Ratzah situation according to Rabbi Yitzchak. Because Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Avdimi is operating within the context of Abba Shol, which means that the question is simply a question of what kavanah you have. Do you have kavanah l'shem mitzvah, or do you not have kavanah l'shem mitzvah? And the Gemara is wondering, what would be that parallel in the case of Shiari Mincha? Can you come up with what's called Trei Gavne Achila in Shiari Mincha? That's the Gemara's working hard, where there are two ways that the Kohen could eat from the Shirayim of the Mincha. And one of them is going to be bumped off, is going to be completely excluded for the sake of the other one. So the Gemara thinks that we can create a structure called Achila Gasa versus Katz B'Mizona. And the choice that's presented to the Kohen is exactly that choice. He can eat the Shirayim when he's full, or he can eat the Shirayim when he's gonna, as I say, he's gonna puke all over the place. He's so full, it's Katz B'Mizona. And we're going to give the Kohen those two choices in the Havamina, and then the pasuk of Matos Peyachal B'Macham Kadosh is going to come to teach us that his achila should be an achila gasa, but not Katz B'Mizona. So the Gemara says that's impossible. You cannot offer the coin. It doesn't, and you cannot even let the thought cross your mind that you can offer the coin the option of achila gasa. Why? Because achila gasa bishmei achila. Let's go to Yom Kippur. What happens if a person eats never an achila gasa on Yom Kippur? Zichayo, Omar Reish Lakish, achila gasa Yom Kippur potter. He did not violate achila of Yom Kippur. I mean, again, that doesn't tell you that you should eat an achila gas on Yom Kippur. Don't walk out of here with the wrong impression. But would you be chayiv kares? The Torah says, "Hanefesh shelo seuna biyom hazeh v'nichras me'amel." Would you be chayiv kares for eating an achila gas? I would ask the same question with regard to matzah, which we'll see later on in the sunnah. Because what happens if you eat matzah achila gas? Right, the Torah says that if you violate the Isser of lo se'una, then you get kares. But if a person violated lo se'una by eating achila gasa, that's not called lo se'una. So according to my understanding, we're now stuck. We have not solved the problem of the analogy between Yibum and Achilas Shirayim, according to Rav Yitzchak bar Avdim. Ella, says the Gemara, I'm going to give you another approach, totally different approach to Ratza lo Ratza. Ratza matzah, ochla, Ratza chametz, ochla. I mean, now at least we're coming close to the pasuk, which was what David was bothered by, right? Talmud lower matzos teachel. Matzos teachel is telling him that he has to eat the matzah and not the chametz. Now, what is matzah and chametz in this context? He says here, Shnei ofana b'shiorei mincha. There are two ways of shiorei mincha. He can eat it either matzah or he can eat it chametz. So if I understand this correctly, he's going to take the shiorei matzah, the shiorei mincha. He's going to add water, right? He's got refined flour. Now he bakes it in the oven. And if he doesn't allow it to rise, he has matzah. If he allows it to rise, he's got a loaf of bread. He's got chametz. And those are the two options that he would have, if not for the pasuk, that reflect the status of the solas before the Akdasha. You could have made it for matzah, you could have made it for chametz. And that's what happens now in the Havamina after the Kmitza. Yeah, before Akdasha, after Akdasha, and after Kmitza. So the Gemara is not happy with this either. So now we have a pasuk with a drasha of Reish Lakish. This pasuk And the interpretation of Reish Lakish is going to establish that the Shiori Mincha have to be eaten matzah and cannot be eaten chametz. You can't make a loaf of bread out of the shirayim of a mincha and eat it. That would not be a fulfillment of the mitzvah because the Torah says, "Lo se'afeh chametz chelko."
What's this having to say that you can have chametz? I don't understand. Pasuk says can't have chametz. Where we have a minute that you can make you can make chametz, you can have matzah.
Right. That what you're saying is exactly the Gemara, but you're asking why did the Gemara entertain the possibility that you could eat the shiori mincha chametz? I mean, the pasuk says lo se'afeh chametz, but the only thing is, I'm not sure where this pasuk appears. If you don't mind, David, could I give you a chumash?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you to open up to Vayikra Vav pasuk Yud. Vayikra Vav pasuk Yud. I'm not sure if this pasuk appears in the context of a korban mincha. That's what I want to double check.
Let's say chametz, chelkom l'sakir somi shoy.
Right. Well, wait a minute. Go back if you don't mind. One pasuk before that, because on the Seres Mimenu, yeah.
Matzah teocher b'mokom kodesh, v'chatzar moed yechluam.
So that pasuk is referring to the mincha. And the next pasuk is also referring to them.
And lo se'afeh chametz, chelkom l'sakir somi shoy. Kodesh kodeshim hi,
right. Yomi Reish Lakish. So it says, what does it mean? Lo se'afeh chametz chelkom nasati also. What's the word chelkom? It seems that Reish Lakish is going to interpret the word chelkom as afilu chelkom lo se'afeh chametz. What does that mean? Okay, we have to know more about menachos here. I'm going to try to see from.
That's what it starts off with. So it's Toras HaMincha. Akrei voiso b'nei Aaron yifnei Hashem al pnei hamizbeach. Herim mimenu l'kumso misos HaMincha mishana.
But what does the word chelkom mean here in pasuk Yud?
No, so like say after chametz chelkom, that's the part that they're going to eat. That's the chelik, isn't it?
Again, Omer Reish Lakish, let's read it again. Afilu chelkom. What's I just have to see what the word chelkom, because Reish Lakish is making a big deal about the word chelkom here.
And they bit account.
Apparently, there are two chalokim. Trying to figure out, does he mean the kmitza that's burnt on the mizbeach? But then, what does it mean lo se'afeh chametz? We don't bake the kmitza. The kmitza goes right onto the mizbeach. So I'm trying to figure out.
Yes, the chacham is the rest of the.
Correct, is the shrine.
Yeah, the shrine.
So what's the word afilu kel? What's afilu kel?
Even the part that stays, I cannot make it into chametz.
But usually when you see the word afilu, it's like lomi, but it goes without saying in case X, afilu chelkom, even in case Y, you're not allowed to bake it as chametz. What's case X? I mean, the other part of the mincha is burnt on the mizbeach. I don't know why. What's afilu chelkom?
So the note here.
Yeah.
Reish Lakish in this exposition takes the phrase "their portion" to refer back to the phrase that precedes it, so that the verse indicates that even the Kohanim's portion of the mincha, i.e. that which remains after the chometz is burned, may not be allowed to leaven into chametz. Rather, it must be eaten unleavened as matzah.
And again, so just clarify one point for me. Without the word afilu, how would we have interpreted lo se'afa chametz? Again, the word chelkom is added to tell you afilu chelek kohanim. But I'm asking the following question: if not for the word chelkom, what would the Torah have in mind in the Havamina of lo se'afa chametz? That the Torah now, according to Reish Lakish, has the word chelkom to tell you afilu chelkom. Oh, maybe I'm just thinking. Right, you have to add shemen. Correct? Does the Torah mention shemen there? That you add shemen? Umishamna. So the soles mincha, which can be burnt on the mizbeach after pizza, has shemen mixed in. And if that be the case, then maybe if you leave it too long, I mean, again, this has to do with the sugya stachim about may peros and machbitzim or a machbitzim, but I'm just throwing out an idea here that there was a havamina that the Torah is prohibiting the chometz to become chometz. So it means the achilas mizbeach, which is the aktor al gabi marocha, cannot be an achila of chometz, and we have to guarantee that the soles, which ends after the kmitza, that soles is matzah, it's not chametz. And therefore the pasuk adds the word chelkom to teach you that even the shirayim, which goes to the kohen doesn't have carte blanche, the option of deciding, well, I'm in the mood for a loaf of bread, I'm in the mood for matzah. I had enough matzah on Pesach, I don't need another piece of matzah. That option doesn't exist. And that's the lav of lo se'afa chametz, that afilu chelkom shel kohen. Lo miboy goes without saying that this pasuk prohibits the part that goes on the mizbech from becoming chametz. You have to protect it and make sure and guarantee that it doesn't become chametz. But even chelkom shel kohen, the kohen doesn't have carte blanche option of baking it as chametz.
But the pasuk says hameseres has to be matzah. Where would that have been?
Maybe there's an essay in a losas. I don't know. It's what's the pasuk again? Read it one more time. Right.
It's a farish.
Right.
I mean, then the question is why, as I say, Losef, and the next pasuk is like Sefer Chometz Chelkom L'Satiyos Nishan.
If the Torah's already said that the shirayim have to be eaten matzah, why does it have to say? So maybe it's an essay in a losas. But one thing is clear, that the shirayim cannot be chametz. So don't tell me that there was a havamina before the pasuk of matzahs te'achel. Again, David is asking, once you have matzahs te'achel, why does the Torah have to say lo te'afi chametz chelkom? I understand the kasha, it's a gewaldige kasha. But just to understand the Gemara's point, the Gemara's kasha is a different kasha. The Gemara is saying, why did the Brisa have to invoke the pasuk matzos te'achel lafuke ahavamina that rotza chametz rotza matzah when the Torah legislated an Iser lav of lo te'afa chametz with regard to the shirayim of the mincha. So don't tell me that I need the pasuk of matzos te'achel to establish that the kohen has only one option, namely eating it as matzah, and he doesn't have another option of eating it as chametz. That's impossible, because the Torah says lo se'afa chametz chelkom. Ella, so maybe it'll come clear in the next line. Rotza matzah ochla, rotza chalut ochla. Apparently, there's something that's not matzah and it's not chametz. It's somewhere in the middle. And that's called chalut. So the Torah would give him an option to eat it matzah or Perhaps if he so desires, he could eat it chalut. We used to say that chalut is like bagels. Have you ever seen the way they make bagels? I think once upon a time I saw it. What they do is they take the dough, they shape it, and then they dip it into boiling hot water. Does this ring a bell? Yes, no, maybe? So that's called chalut. On the one hand, it's not matzah. On the other hand, it's not chametz. They'll take the isa chaluta means after it's dipped in hot water, and they'll put it into the oven. So if we only had the pasuk of lo se'afeh chametz chelkam, we would allow the kohen to eat from the shirayim chalut. He can make a bagel out of the shirayim. Talmud Lomar, for that we need the pasuk matzos te'achel. It's not enough that it's not chametz. You need matzah. So I think this addresses David's question to some extent. I don't know if we're totally in the clear, but at least we make some progress here. There are two commands in the Torah. If I only had lo se'afeh chametz, I would allow chalut. Now the Torah says matzos te'achel, you don't have the option of eating a bagel. You have only one option, Mr. Cohen. You have to eat it matzah. And that's the way, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, we will interpret the Brisa according to Abba Shaul, meaning there's a parallel now between two options of the Yibum and Chalitza, and two options of the Kohen with regard to Shiari Mincha. And what are those two options? They're either matzah or chalut. And for that, we need the pasuk, in the case of Yibum, Yevamot Yavol mitzvah, that he doesn't have two equal options. He doesn't just decide what he likes and what he prefers. The Torah obligates him in Yibum. And the pasuk Matzos Te'achel tells me he doesn't have the option of chalut, which means he avoided the lotas of Te'achel Chometz. No. He's got to eat it matzah. Hai chalut hechidomi. What is the case of chalut? Imatzahi ha-matzahi. If it's matzah, you're allowed to eat it. He's obligated to eat it. The lav matzahi. Then matzos amarachmon. So I think now the Gemara is introducing another pasuk. Let's see, Vayikra Yud, pasuk Yud Beis. Now we're introducing another pasuk. Is there a Kechuas HaMincha or something?
What's HaMincha? And the Sars Misha Hashem. No matzos, eggs on his back, he perish Kadashim.
Echlua matzos.
No matzos.
So how could you have a haba, meaning that chalut would be acceptable when we know that chalut is not matzah? If it were matzah, then you're going to eat it chalut. But now the Torah is saying matzos, and you have to eat it matzos. So chalut is not even an option. So again, we're still trying to rack our brains. What were the two options of Ratzah, low Ratzah with regard to Shiraya Mincha? And we exclude one of those two options based on the pasuk Matzos Te'achel. And Chalut is not a good candidate. And where it says low, Matzahi. Really, Chalut is considered Matzah. I have a feeling that the Yemenites paskin like this Gemara because they eat. Have you ever seen the Yemenite matzahs? They look like pito. Anyway, maybe it's chalut matzah. No, so if it's matzah, why can't the Kohen eat it matzah? Ulahachi tanabe kra. That's why the pasuk was needed. Matzos te'achel in achil shari mincha to exclude chalut, even though it's matzah. So when the Torah says ichlu matzos, Pasuk Yud Beis, we would have said that chalut is enough of matzah, it passes, it's within the category of matzah, such that now he can fulfill the mitzvah of achlu matzah. And therefore the Tana, not the Tana, I mean to say the Torah teaches us with the pasuk of matzah's te'achel li'akev. Meaning li'akev, even though chalut does have the status of matzah, but as far as shiori mincha is concerned, the Torah is more demanding. It wants absolute matzah, not matzah to the first, to the first number, but to the second number, right? The real matzah. And what's the real matzah? Not chalut. Chalut is matzah, but it's not matzah. Again, I'm not sure what repercussions this might have in Hilchas Brachos, for example. Would you make a moti lech minachas on chalut? The Gemara is saying it is matzah, but it's not matzah. El chalut matzah dekamrina. So that which we said based on that brayso, that chalut has the din of matzah. Therefore, we need the extra pasuk matzos te'achel to exclude shiari mincha. My hilchas. Why do they tell us that chalut is called matzah when at the end of the day you're telling me that after you have the second pasuk of matzos te'achel, you're not allowed to, the Kohen is not allowed to eat chalut from the shiari mincha? And the Gemara answers, Lo ma'asha adam yotzi bo yidei chofasa v'pesach. That chalut is like matzah. Again, it doesn't have the higher level of matzah included in the mitzvah of the Kohen to eat matzos te'achel from the shiari mincha, but it is matzah. For universal purposes, it's matzah, including the night of Pesach. She'af al pi techalte, even though he took the dough and he submerged it into hot water. Afal pi dechalte meikara, Kevon da hadar afie, v'tanur lechem oni krinim baby adam yotzi bechovasa v'pesach. So if you're asking me, why did the Brayso go out of its way to teach us that chalut is classified as matzah? The answer is for Leil HaPesach. That as far as Leil HaPesach is concerned, after he did the chalut, the chalita, and he dipped the isa, the dough, into hot boiling hot water, then he baked it in the oven, it's called lechem oni. And you can be yotzei your mitzvah of achilas matzah. But there's a separate halach in kmitza, in shiari mincha, that this is not acceptable for the mitzvah. It's chalut. It doesn't have the upgraded status of matzah, and therefore the Kohen doesn't have the option of doing a chalut on this korban mincha. Okay, then that's where we're going to stop for today. Here at the Mishnah on Daf Mem Omra. Okay, then have a great day.